and welcome to this Fantasy Fellowship Buddy Read wrap-up. Today we are talking about some of the books that we have read together in the community over the month of October during our Battle of the Five Worlds readathon. My name's Sarah and I am joined by the lovely Melissa, Izzy, Erin, Hannah, and Yagoda. I did get everyone, didn't I? So yeah, this has been a bit of a different month for us because we've obviously had our huge Battle of the Five Worlds readathon this month. And when I say huge, like we don't do anything by halves in the Fantasy Fellowship, do we, guys? So we have like quite a lot of books to talk about today. We're going to start off with one of our, I should explain that so we're a bi-monthly book club and every other month we vote for a book that we're all going to read together. As like a community, we try and get as many people involved as possible. And voting for the readathon book club pick was quite something. It was an event. Would you say, Erin?
It's a phenomenon.
It was pure chaos. The battle lines were drawn. There was like many threats being made. Many allegiances were changing depending on what people were going to vote for. It was a lot of fun. And then in the innovation team, we just thought we're just going to have to give them all the books, basically. So we actually had 5 book club reads that everyone could choose from. So one of those book club reads was Cemetery Boys. So we're going to go to Melissa, who's going to tell us a bit about it.
All right, so this was one of the book club books for the month of October. So it's Cemetery Boys by Aiden Thomas. And I think it was the perfect way to kick off October, at least for myself. It follows along this main character and his cousin, and they have accidentally summoned a spirit. And so it's kind of them with the spirit, and the spirit will not leave until, some loose ends have been, kind of figured out in his life. And then he will move on to the, to the next stage of life. So it's kind of like that detective gang type vibe where they're going around trying to help this spirit. It actually, I think, was mostly selected for the book club because it fit one of the prompts, which was a book that was written by a trans or non-binary author. So it fit right into that. It does cover a lot of things that I personally just don't know a lot about. So a lot about Latino culture. So it talks about the Day of the Dead a lot, which I really enjoyed learning some of those traditions that goes along with that, just because I didn't really know a lot about it beforehand. And also, transphobia is kind of a piece of it. And so it was just really interesting to read about a trans character and the struggles that they do deal with, just on a regular basis, and kind of becoming accepted from your family as you're going through this phase of your life. So I really liked a lot of learning about some of those pieces as well. But I think overall, it was kind of it's very YA, but it also was wholesome. And I feel like that was kind of the consensus with the group. Some people did think it was a little bit slower in pieces of it, which I could kind of agree with that as well. But also it was my first book of the month, so I was not yet annoyed by books that had too much description. So, but yeah, so I know that a few others in this group also read it as well. So I don't know if you guys felt the same kind of way about it, but overall though, yeah, I had kind of mentioned that. So back in the 90s, Disney would make these Halloween movies, and they were always my favorite time of year. And that's just kind of like the whole time I was reading it, that's all that I could think of was this just is the same type of feel to it.
You read it, didn't you, Erin?
I did. I really liked it, and I would agree with much of what Melissa said about it. I have said already that I always say this I like to channel my inner teenager, and I do enjoy YA, and it was definitely the same with Cemetery Boys, but it did have that added dimension for me where I was reading and learning through the eyes of a character who's very different from me. You know, almost every aspect of his life was different from mine. But one thing that I really loved about this book was definitely the supporting cast of characters. They were just all, for me, they just all felt very rich and vivid. And seeing how he fit into his family, or didn't sometimes, as the case may be, it just really resonated with me. Yeah, I loved it.
Amazing.
And also, don't read it when you're hungry, because they talked about food a lot. And I swear, yeah, just like every chapter they would talk about, you know, his grandma was in there making, you know, tamales or whatever. And I was just like, man, I need some Mexican food. Or
Oh, it's definitely another one that I want to read. Nice bit of wholesome Halloween vibes. I feel like even though I haven't read it, like from what I've seen of it, what I've seen of the cover and the way that people talk about it, it feels like it's going to be a film one day.
yeah, I could totally see that. Yeah, it definitely covers a lot of more current, you know, issues that people deal with, especially with the I've said it wrong then, sorry.
That's all right.
LGBTQ, I think it's IA plus, I can't remember, but yeah. So, but yeah, I definitely, because that is not my life, that I loved learning about what that is like for them, so.
Absolutely. Was that the shortest of the book club picks that we could have chosen from?
I don't think so. I think
Frankenstein.
I think the Book Eaters and Frankenstein might be shorter, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So that was also a reason why I picked it, because I was scared looking at some of the others, like being 600 pages. I was like, this is a readathon, you guys. I can't read that fast.
Well, that's funny though, because you then decided to pick another of the book club reads and read Fairy Tale.
Yes. So actually for Fairy Tale, I had gotten it from my library, so I don't have a physical copy of that one. But so I ended up reading it a little bit before October and not for the readathon, but I still joined in on the discussion and really loved watching it unfold for everybody. I don't know if other people do this, but I love getting a book and also the audiobook and like following along. It's like full immersion. So that's what I did with this one. I really liked the audiobook for Fairy Tale. So just to kind of introduce that one. So that one is by Stephen King. That's his new Portal fantasy that just came out at the beginning of September. So, but yeah, I really enjoyed it. The first half anyways. And I think throughout the group, everybody kind of agreed with our thoughts on it, that the first part of the book was like 5-star. It was really good, like building up the world and things like that. But then shockingly, when it became the fantasy side of it, none of us really enjoyed it that much, which for the Fantasy Fellowship, I thought was kind of funny. But yeah, it just like the characters weren't all very well developed, things like that at the last half of it. So there wasn't like too much chatter, because all of us were just like, yes, I agree. That's how I felt, you know, so we were all definitely in line on that one.
I'm so gutted because I was so looking forward to that book. I haven't read it. I didn't read it this month.
Well, I'm shocked because that was the one that you went on your Instagram for and made everybody vote for it.
Do not call me out like this, Melissa.
I will call you out. Yeah, because I remember going to bed and waking up and there was like double the votes for Fairy Tale. I was like, what happened last night while I was sleeping? And then I saw Sarah's Instagram story and I said, that checks out. That makes sense.
Yeah, because when I first heard like the synopsis for it, I was like, this sounds amazing. This sounds like perfection. But then you all read it first and like everyone was like, oh, you know, it's just absolutely shit. And it was more that like people didn't enjoy it. It's like they got to the second half and they were so angry because they'd enjoyed the first half so much, is the impression that I'd got.
Yeah,
I've heard a lot of people saying it was like such a waste, and I think that's even more frustrating sometimes, rather than a book just being like rubbish from the start.
Yeah,
It's like when
definitely.
you're really invested and when you're like really enjoying it, and then it just kind of like really disappoints you. And obviously Stephen King has such a huge fan base. You're a Stephen King fan, aren't you?
Yeah, I love Stephen King. So I was so excited for, kind of that more fantasy side of things because it's kind of the dark fairy tale vibe, which I love. Dark fairy tale, I love all of that stuff. So definitely disappointed because I really enjoy Stephen King. I've read quite a few of his, but um, there's other people though on the Discord that don't like Stephen. They say that he has terrible endings, and I will say for this one, I will have to agree on that.
So sad. So did anyone enjoy it?
I don't really think so.
Wow.
I know.
There was a dog, wasn't there?
Yeah. So yeah, it did fit a few prompts like the animal companion,
Yeah.
and I think I was just mostly invested in the dog more than anything else in the book. So,
Sounds about right.
but that's usual for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, well, that is a real shame. And then our next book club pick was Frankenstein with the lovely Izzy that's going to tackle this classic for us.
Yeah, no, happily. So this was, I mean, these were voted on before I actually joined the Discord. I didn't join until August. Yeah.
What?
You can't remember a time without me.
I actually can't.
No.
I can't believe that.
And I studied this at A level, so I was actually really excited to see it on our on the book club picks because I haven't read it since I did it at A level, and I won't disclose how long ago that was. But I think one of the things that really struck me at the time when I read it then was that Mary Shelley, who wrote this, she wrote this when she was 18 years old, which is at the same age that I was when I was like studying it.
I didn't know that.
I've got loads of facts to throw at you guys because I know so much about it because I studied
Love
it.
That.
But one of the coolest things about it, I think, is that it was actually written whilst Mary Shelley and her future husband, then kind of slightly controversial illicit lover Percy, were visiting Lord Byron in Lake Geneva. So they were all staying in this big old spooky house, and they challenged each other to write a ghost story. And after initially being stuck for ideas, Frankenstein was her entry.
No way.
Yeah, and they used to like read to in the evening when it got dark. They would gather and all like read each other what they'd written. And it was also at a time when there was this huge volcanic activity in Europe, which meant that it was like it was known as the year with no summer because it was like dark and rainy all year. So it was very like gothic vibes all year round. So it's very atmospheric, and I think that comes across in the writing. And I think it's
It's so cool.
Yeah, I think it's a really mature classic considering she was 18 when she wrote it. And I have been told by the Fantasy Fellowshippers that we picked it for our book club because it's an easily accessible story for spooky season. And obviously it's October, Halloween tomorrow. And being out of copyright, it means it's available free in a lot of places, and also as free audiobooks on like Spotify and podcasts and stuff. So it was really accessible for people to get. I think a lot of people actually listened to it rather than read it, which makes the prose, which is quite dense and flowery, a little bit easier to comprehend. I think our overwhelming consensus was that we all disliked Victor Frankenstein, in some cases very passionately. I don't think anyone had a good word to say about Victor Frankenstein. He, despite being seemingly clever enough to build and animate a humanoid creature, he makes a lot of really infuriatingly stupid decisions in this book that I think frustrated a lot of people. And then kind of conversely, we all felt really sorry for the creature who's like rejected by everyone he meets, including the person who should care for him most, which is his parent, Victor. And I think that, I mean, I was going straight at it in the chat with all these themes about like science and technology versus religious doctrine and creationism and acting as God and like around responsibility and parenting. But I think actually the most like the funniest and most like engaging bits of our conversation about it was definitely about how much we all disliked Victor. It was good to have a lot of vehemence in that sense. But I think actually it really split the group. Some people loved it and some people really disliked it. But I think it's a good read for spooky season, because it is very dark and atmospheric. Lots of descriptions of very ragged terrain in Switzerland and Scotland as well. So yeah, it's got great gothic vibes. I would recommend it as a good gothic read, but it's not for everybody, as our book club decided.
Oh, that sounds amazing.
It was good. I think people, it was a good pick for October, all for books that are very accessible to everyone. So
yeah,
in that sense too, because it's out of copyright, so it's free.
Yeah, very true. It's like one of those stories that you kind of like grow up and you know that name so well and you've like heard it everywhere and you kind of know the story, but I've never actually read the book. And I really should have done this month, but
you should. Yeah, the more people that know that Frankenstein is the doctor and not the creature is helpful as well. The number of people are just like, oh, I'm dressing up as Frankenstein for Halloween, and I was like, no, you're not. You're dressing up as the creature. Stop. And I'm really gutted that I have my A-level copy still with all the tabs and highlighting and notes, but it's in storage, so I don't have it to show, which made me sad. But yeah, I did listen to it this time, which was a different experience as well.
Yeah.
But yeah. It was a good read for us as a group.
The facts that you've just told us, I had no idea about any of that. I kind of want to go on that trip and read stories with them. Maybe just leave like the sordid parts out.
Yeah, definitely.
Amazing. I have never heard of this book, this next one. Promise of Blood, with you, Erin.
Yes.
Tell us all about it.
Okay, so Promise of Blood, I actually read this after I had completed the readathon prompts. I read it for the purpose of discussing it in this video, so it is very fresh in my mind.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Commitment.
So,
dedication.
Yes. Here for the cause. So I looked back and it was Discord member Alexandria in Wonderland that suggested that we read this, and she didn't say why, but lots of people jumped on board very strongly in support of this book. A couple of people had read it already and were ready to recommend it, so it brought it to the fore, I think. So I found it a very interesting book. It's inspired by the French Revolution, and it is centered around the overthrow of the monarchy in the kingdom that's in the book. And the fantasy world in this book feels really different to classic epic fantasy. And I think it's where it's positioned in history, because there are guns, which are actually quite they're quite pivotal in the plot and the magic system. And there are other things that you don't normally get in your kind of classic epic fantasies. There are trade unions. There's quite interesting pieces around the kind of the labor movement and trade unions that was happening at that time in history. And there's newspapers and printing presses and things like that. The magic system in this one is really well thought out, and the different types of magic are very, that different characters have, are really tied to their social standing and allegiances. There's a lot about class in this book, which I guess you would expect, as it's about the, you know, a coup and the overthrow of the monarchy. So it's a very political book. And this means that it's not as grimdark as the title makes it sound. And quite a few people in the chat were promised blood, and they did not get their blood. And they were not happy about the lack of blood. Now, don't get me wrong, there is a lot of fighting, there's war, there's conflict, people are getting killed. There is violence in the book, but it's not quite as gritty. And I'm not a big grimdark fan myself. And sometimes I'm reading a book and, you know, someone's getting done for, and I'm like, oh, it's not really like that. It is more of a kind of political story where you're not sure where everyone's allegiances lie and who's working for who, and you know. So this is a multiple point of view book. And most of the characters that you follow are really interesting, and you really start to root for them and worry for them and their loved ones as well. But there's only one woman point of view character, and she is hugely underutilized. And in general, the women in this book are seen through the eyes of men, and they're not as well developed as you would hope for. Now, I spoke about this in the chat with some of the other Discord members, and I was told that the author said, I think, I'm not sure if this was his debut or not, I should maybe have checked that, but at the time that he wrote this book, he just wasn't very confident writing about women.
Okay.
Now, so in a way, I actually think like it's better to shy away from it than get it massively wrong. I mean, I think we're all women on this chat, I think we've all read books written by men where they don't quite get it right. And I have to say, I didn't really notice that in this book, but it's because of the general absence of women. And I understand that as you go through this series, this is a trilogy, this is the first one in the Powder Mage trilogy. As you go through the trilogy, it improves, and you get more from this lady Neela, who is a point of view character, and you get more from the other women in the book as well. So that is reassuring, but it didn't really come across. I only knew that from talking. It didn't really come across in the book. But overall, I enjoyed the book. There's a lot going on in it, so you really do have to concentrate. And when I think about where everybody is at the beginning of the book and where they are at the end, it's like wild how much is covered in this first installment. So I think I will read on. I'm not sure when. I keep starting these trilogies. I blame all of you. Like everyone keeps suggesting that we read first books in series, and then I have to try and get to the second one. But yeah, no, it was really interesting because I would have never picked it, mainly because of the title, because I do not wish to be promised blood. And also the cover, which I have here, which I'll just show you if my Kindle wakes up. Yeah, so I don't know if you can, oh no, my fake background. Spoiler, my background's fake. So you can see this chap here, and this is a cover which basically has a man with, I think it's actually a gun. I was going to say man with sword, but it's certainly a man with weapon. And generally speaking, I do not pick up books that are a man in military uniform with weapon, but I'm glad I did. So as seems to frequently happen, Fantasy Fellowship suggested it, I read it, and I liked it. So yeah.
Yay! Now Sword of Kaigan.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Maybe once I've read all my library books.
No, that does sound really interesting actually, and I feel like I can imagine exactly who was disappointed that there wasn't enough blood as well, which is fun. I'm gonna go and check the chat in a minute and see if I was right. What was like the general consensus? Did people are people reading on?
I'm not sure people have said. I think there are a few people. I think the people who were really, really keen on reading this book are slightly disappointed by it. But I think there were maybe some people that picked it up that were surprised by it. I haven't checked the full stats for the readathon, but I would expect that this particular book maybe wasn't one of the most popular reads this month because it doesn't actually fit a huge amount of prompts, unlike some of the other picks. So I think some people wanted to read this book and made it fit into their prompt rather than the other way around, where some people had prompts and looked for book club books to fill it. So I'm not sure if there was a huge consensus on the book, really. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Who's going to be reading that one then? Yay! Oh, okay, I'm really excited about the next one because I'm so intrigued by it. So I wonder if you can convince me to pick it up. And I feel like if anyone can, it is you, Izzy. Talk to us about Lore Olympus.
Yes, Lore Olympus. It's one of my faves, and I have all 3 volumes here. It's volume 1 and volume 2 and volume 3. All tabbed up. I'm ready to talk about. So Lore Olympus is one of the most popular webtoon graphic novels that's ever been published. I think it's the #1 graphic novel on Webtoons, which is an online graphic novel and comic platform. And it's now being published in print. And the first 3 volumes have been released, with the most recent one being released in October, which was volume 3, which made it really perfect for a buddy read pick. And I nominated it and I led the buddy read because we've got loads of fans of classical mythology in our community. And I think Lore Olympus takes a really fresh take on it. It tells what is a very often told and well-loved tale of Hades and Persephone and their love story, but there are plenty of other side stories that explore other myths and other deities in it, so it's not just focused on them, which I enjoy. And I mean, there's so many things I could talk about what I like about it, but I made some notes on some of the things that really make it my favorite. The first thing I love is how the Olympians are all modernized. So they live in like modern world up on Olympus. They have like cell phones. They have something called Fates book rather than Facebook and like stuff like that. Like just all these really lovely little like kind of references to our world. But then when they go down into the mortal realm, that's still set in ancient Greece, so that contrast is really cool. And the characters are all so relatable and in many cases are really adorable. So some of my favorite elements are the banter that you get between the three kind of main leaders, if you will, the kings of the Olympian gods, which is Zeus, Poseidon and Hades. Poseidon especially is portrayed as like a bro, like just a complete frat boy idiot, which I really enjoy. So yeah, that's good. Hades also has 7 dogs, so this fit the animal companion prompt for our readathon really well. And I can't resist a cute animal companion, as many of us can't do in the community. And Rachel Smythe has also, she's really inverted a lot of the many like classical interpretations of the gods in the stories, which I think is quite brave and also just means it's a really fresh take. But I mean, the main thing is that just visually, it's just stunning. The colours are really vivid, and fashion plays a huge role in it as well. So you can always keep track of who the different deities are by their vivid colours, which are all kind of unique to them, or kind of suggestive of their family. So like Artemis and Apollo, who are twins, obviously they're both the same colour. But then they're also, you can be picked out by their varied styles of dialogue and their clothing. So there's lots of ways for you to keep track of what is actually quite a sprawling, massive, well, a huge sprawling, massive classical mythology that's been retold so many times. But by doing that, it makes it really easy for you to follow. But one of the things that we as a group appreciated the most, and one of the things we discussed quite a lot in our chat, was how sensitively Lore Olympus deals with trauma. So there's a lot, I mean, there's quite a lot of trigger warnings that come with Lore Olympus because it deals with some really difficult things, but actually there should probably be trigger warnings on classical Greek mythology because the deities especially are not nice a lot of the time. They are really shitty deities who do shitty things. And it's dealt with such a rawness and compassion and so much heart that you not only feel for the characters, but you actually feel quite deeply moved as a reader, or at least I did. And I think quite a lot of the other people in our community that read it felt that as well. And were quite surprised that a graphic novel would have that level of kind of feeling, because often when you think of comics, you think of like superheroes. I mean, I will just put this out there. This is the first graphic novel I ever picked up. I'd never read one before. And I think I've been really spoiled with this one. Because it's so easy to read and it's so visually lovely, but it's just, the narrative in it is so strong and so compelling and also so heartwarming and heart-wrenching at the same time. So that's my pitch to you, Saara.
You took my challenge and you ran, Izzy. Can't wait to get off this call now so I can go and read it in bed.
Good. Well, you can read it online as well. You don't even have to get the bits because it's
I actually do have them.
Oh,
Well,
do you?
Oh my
gosh.
I've got the first one, I think.
Do it and send me your thoughts. I'd love to hear them. But if you want to read it online and it's still being published weekly on Webtoon. So the great thing is that it's still going, like the volumes. This one, what does volume 3 cover? It covers, I think it's like episodes 50 to 75 or something, and there's 250-ish, well no, 220-ish so far online.
Wow.
So there's loads more to come in print. They've just announced the 4th edition of the volumes are going to be published in May next year. So the next one's kind of already set. And I'm trying really hard not to read the webtoon because I like reading it in print. But it's getting really hard not to read ahead.
So is it very romance centered, or?
It is quite, yeah, it's essentially like when in our, because I did this for Animal Companion prompt, and I also did volume 1 for, I did volume 3 for Animal Companion prompt, and I did volume 1 for published since 2020, because we're allowed 3 graphic novels in our, out of our 12 books for the readathon, and I did do 3, but only 2 Lore Olympus. So we have to say what genre it was, wasn't it? And so I did say that this was romance because that's primarily the story, but it deals with so many other things, and it's about relationships, I would say, not just romance, because it's about family relationships and about friendships as well. And yeah, It's great. It makes me feel really warm and fuzzy inside.
Aw, wholesome.
Yeah, but also like hard hitting.
Yeah, definitely. It sounds amazing. And from what I've heard in the server, a lot of people enjoyed it.
It's just so easy to read as well. If you need something easy, then like I often don't have the energy to read because I spend all day reading for the day job. So sometimes you just want something that's a bit easier to consume. So yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you. The next one, you are going to tell us all about Sabriel, aren't you, Erin?
I am. So yes, Sabriel was a really it predated the readathon. It was picked as a buddy read pick before the readathon prompts were announced. And I think the triggering event for a buddy read of Sabriel being proposed was the release of the very beautiful Illumicrate Daphne Press edition. So many people were very keen to read their Daphne Press edition. So I had a bit of FOMO, but did not have Daphne Press budget. So I have a lovely Australian anniversary edition, which has this lovely cover with Sabriel on it. So that's her there, my girl. So yes, as Sarah already mentioned, this is a reread. It was a reread for many of us, and so a lot of people had read it when they were children or when they were teenagers, more commonly. Now there seemed to be a split between people who had read it as adults and people who had reread it, who had read it initially as children. And the defining event seemed to be that if you'd read it from when you were a teenager, one of the main things you remembered was a scene where a penis is described. And I think this was just something that was so exciting for many of the particularly female young women that read this book, that it really stuck in the mind. Now I read it as an adult. I didn't actually read it that long ago for the first time, and I loved it. Had absolutely no recollection of this penis that everybody was going on about. So I think that's the split. But anyway, so yes, it is young adult. And I would say not only is it young adult, it's proper old school teenage fiction. This came out 27 years ago. It was published in 1995. So it's been around. And I really enjoyed it, as I say, the first time that I read it as an adult. But some people who were coming to it for the first time didn't enjoy it so much because they felt it was a bit too YA. Now, I'm a bit of a YA fan. I don't think I've ever grown up properly. So for me, there isn't really a thing where something's too YA, but this is proper teenage fiction. Sabriel at the beginning of the book is a schoolgirl. She's just about to leave school, and she's I wouldn't say she's had the most conventional childhood. I'm trying to avoid spoilers here, but she's still very sheltered, and she's just very much a teenage girl, a young girl. And something that I really like about Sabriel as you go through the book is she is so capable and she's so level-headed, and she's just ready to deal with all sorts of literal horrors that appear in her path and that she has to deal with. But she does make mistakes and she muddles through things, and she doesn't always do things the way that she wants to have done them. And and also because she's sheltered, she went to an all-female school, she went to a girls' school, and so when she meets a man, it's like she's literally never met one before, pretty much. So I find that quite endearing, to be honest. The magic system in Sabriel is really cool, I think, but there was a couple of people in the chat felt that we didn't really get enough of it in Sabriel. It's hard for me to look at that objectively because I have read all the books in the Old Kingdom series now, so I know what's to come. And if you're watching this and you're not sure that there was enough magic in Sabriel, there's more. So if you enjoyed it, keep reading and enjoy that world, and the surroundings of the Old Kingdom, and the magic system that Sabriel uses. A real standout for almost everybody seemed to be Mogget. Again, not too much spoilers. Mogget is a cat. He's a bit of an unusual cat, but he's a cat. He's a white cat, but I would say he's got very strong black cat energy, and he's very sarcastic and sardonic, and you know, he's a really great foil for Sabriel, who's very kind of straight down the line and, you know, quite earnest and wanting to do the right thing. And he's just there basically being a smart arse a lot of the time. And that was something that I really enjoyed on both read-throughs. So yeah, for me, again, another big hit. Really liked it again. And not only that, I well, before I ditched it for Promise of Blood, I started reading Lyriel, the next book in the series. So yeah, it was a really nice return to the Old Kingdom for me. I hadn't been away too long because the most recent book in the series, Terciel and Eleanor, only came out quite recently. But it was nice to go back to the beginning again, see where it all started.
So how many books in the series are there altogether if they're still being released?
Now you're asking.
7.
I think, yeah, I was going to say, I think Terciel and Eleanor was the 7th, but there was a long break between the other books and Terciel and Eleanor. I'm not actually sure what the background was to the big long break. I think he maybe just wanted to return back to it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was like it'd never been away really. But that's more about that book than Sabriel. So, yeah.
I think a lot of us who read it as teenagers as well have only read the first 3. So I've not read the following 4, and I've got them all now. I've actually got signed copies because someone in our lovely Fantasy Fellowship community no longer wanted theirs. So I've got a full set of hardback signed copies, which is really lovely. They're all signed to Stuart, and my name is not Stuart, but I don't care. But thank you, Stuart, in our community. But yeah, it was very nostalgic for me reading it, like with the bell. As soon as they mentioned the bells, I was like, ah. It was really good. I'm really looking forward to continuing with it and reading the ones that I never read before. I think that's going to be really fun to do that as an adult.
It's definitely like one of those books that I'm absolutely gutted that I didn't read when I was younger. Because when people talk about it, when like proper fans of Sabriel talk about it, they just, you can tell it's really special to them. I read it for the first time earlier this year and like I really enjoyed it, but you don't have the nostalgia attached, do you? Which I think is a big part of why it's such a well-loved series.
I think it hits different as an adult, probably. You know, if you are a young adult reading young adult fiction, it's for you. And I sometimes think that people who criticize young adult fiction and they say it's not this and not that, and they're in their 30s or their 40s, it's like, no, you've got to channel your inner 15-year-old in order to fully appreciate it. And I think if you actually read it when you are 15, that's even better. I think Sabriel is one of these books that started a love affair with fantasy for a lot of people. You know, for me, it was Tamara Pierce. That was the kind of gateway drug to the wider fantasy world. But I think for a lot of people, it's this book, and so that's why revisiting it was really special.
I think one of the things that a lot of us who had read it as well as teenagers, what we said was that when you are reading it, I mean, I think I was 12 when I read this, so like it very much almost a preteen, and all of my friends, we all read it at the same time, so it's probably my first ever book club experience as well, because we got all come into school and talk about reading it together, which was really fun. But at the time, I didn't question the romance element at all, and I think what a lot of people have said reading it as adults is that, I mean, I read a lot of romantasy. Romantasy is probably my main genre that I read. So reading this it's a very YA romance. I can't remember how that develops over the future books. So I'm looking forward to that element. But it's nice that it's not the main element and it's not the main part of Sabriel's development as a character too, which I think is good as a young person to be reading as well. You're so focused on her adventure and not her love story, whereas a lot of young adult fiction is about love. So that's really good as it as well. But yeah,
first time I heard of it was when I was like absolutely mad on Sarah J Maas, like a few years ago. I think I'd like read the Okota trilogy, and then I just like wanted to read everything from her, and I was like learning about her and like seeing what she'd accomplished, because she started writing really young, didn't she? And in all her interviews she was saying that was like one of her biggest inspirations.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Just a big fan.
She is.
Wait, and after reading it I can like see elements, which is cool. So So the next book is The Last Unicorn. So I'm going to be talking about that. And actually, I feel like this is kind of a similar experience as to what I had when I read Sabriel. It's just, I really enjoyed it, but I feel like I'm missing nostalgia attached to it. And I wish that like it had been one that I'd read when I was younger. I'd never has anyone read this or watched the film? You have, Yagoda? Have you read it or watched the film?
I've watched the film. It's like I watch it nearly every Christmas, so for me it's like a Christmas movie. So yeah, I love it. But I didn't actually know it's a book until I heard about it on the Fantasy Fellowship.
Oh wow! So are you gonna read it?
Yeah, I will.
Yeah. I don't know if you can see on this cover, but it says The Last Unicorn is the best book I have ever read. You need to read it. If you've already read it, you need to read it again. Can you guess who has written that?
And is it Robin Hobb, Sarah?
It's not Robin Hobb, but I'll give you a clue. It's a book that we have read together as the community, and it made me pick the book up without question. One that you really liked, Taryn.
Oh, is it Patrick Rothfuss?
It is.
Ah.
So, like, thinking about how amazing a writer Patrick Rothfuss is, if he has said a book is the best book he's ever read, like, that is an instant buy. And I can definitely see, like, why. And, like, reading The Name of the Wind is, like, one of those books that you don't see any words, like, you are in the world, you're completely immersed in the story, you're with the characters, and I think that was very like true of this book too from the start, because it's only like just under 300 pages, so it's like a kind of one sitter book. I think I did it in a couple of sittings, and like from the start you're in like this magical forest, and it's like so like old school fantasy and like classic and like not kind of like wholesome, but in the way that like Wheel of Time and Robin Hobb and Patrick Rothfuss, in the way that they write, which is kind of my favorite thing, rather than the more modern, grimdark, like urban fantasies. This is definitely like more up my street. Yeah, so from like the very beginning, you're kind of just completely immersed in this forest, and it is like magical, but God, it's brutal. Like it's so sad, and yeah, I kind of like found it really, really emotional actually, and more so than I thought it was, and almost in like quite a uncomfortable way at times. I don't know why I keep waving it about. There it is. Now I'm gonna put it down. But yeah, so yeah, it's definitely one that I wish that I had read when I was younger. And apparently the film is like absolutely amazing. I know you've just said that, Yagoda, and a lot of the chat for it was quite quiet, but the people that were in it were saying how much they loved the film, and kind of like a lot of the people in there were saying that they've read it so many times or they've watched the film so many times and it means so much to them, and it's something that's been with them their whole life. So not having that, I did really enjoy it, but like there's like a I don't have that connection to it, I guess. But yeah, I'm definitely going to watch the film, and I think it is one of those books that you will get more and more out of it the more you read it. Definitely one like to be reread and reread. As Patrick Rothfuss says, if you've already read it, you need to read it again.
Do you think he should maybe stop reading Last Unicorn over and over and finish the series instead?
Brutal.
Melissa!
Oh no.
What a burn!
I mean, that's Patrick Rothfuss not coming to the con next year.
I reject my statement.
Oh, amazing. Okay, so your first book that you're going to talk about is The Golden Enclaves.
Yeah, as part of a buddy reads, we decided to read The Golden Enclaves, and The Golden Enclaves is the third book in the Skullman series by Naomi Novik. And well, I mean, I don't want to talk too much about the books because I don't want to spoil anyone,
Yeah.
especially not people who didn't read the first 2 books. So let's just go with the most obvious things. In the first 2 books, we follow a girl named Elle, and I kind of, when Aaron was talking about Mogget and describing him, I thought, okay, that kind of fits Elle as a description. She's also very snarky, very sarcastic, very. For me, I really thought she was very lovable, but not everybody agreed. So, yeah, maybe a typical teenage girl that's had a hard life, maybe like that. And well, she's in the Scholomance, which is a school for magical children, and it's kind of meant to protect them, but it kind of doesn't. So, yeah, a lot of children die in the
wow.
Scholomance. Yeah. This is a major plot point, so it's nothing spoilery. It's just it's there from nearly the beginning.
Yeah.
And the second book ends on a huge cliffhanger, and the third book picks up right there. So you end the second book on a cliffhanger, and then you go to the third book, and it's the scene. It continues, so that's really satisfying. You don't have a time jump or something. So that was nice. And then the setting changes. So the first 2 books were mostly inside the Scholomance, and in the third book, that changes. So that was one of the things that were a bit divisive between the people who read it. So I loved it. I loved the book, the third book, but there were some people that didn't enjoy it quite as much as the first 2. Because the setting changed, and also because of some of the choices the author made as to which characters to highlight, which not to highlight, the direction things were going. So it was very satisfying for some people and not as satisfying for other people.
Yeah.
Some people loved it. Some people didn't like it as much as the first 2 books. And some people didn't like it at all and were really, really mad about it. So it was a lively discussion.
I feel like that always happens with like a third book, though, isn't it? It's like the third book syndrome.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I don't think it was surprising with the third book, because Naomi Novik also, she gives all the answers. So and sometimes when you really get all the answers, you're bound to be dissatisfied with some of them. So yeah, that was maybe that.
Yeah. Amazing. Has anyone else read that series?
I've read the first one.
Yeah, I
What's
read
your
the first
opinion?
one for the readathon.
Ah.
I felt very meh about it, but then it ended on a cliffhanger. So then I was like, well,
Ooh.
fine, I'll read the
Yeah,
second
I'm gonna
one.
do that.
But now that I know that the second ends in a cliffhanger, I'm probably going to have to read the whole thing now.
Yeah.
Yeah. You will. And I hope you don't yeah, you will love it as well. And maybe one thing more, because what was also said in the group chat, if you don't like the writing style of one of the Scholomance books, you should maybe try one of the other Naomi Novik books, because it's written completely different than the other stuff she writes. So yeah, that's maybe something to think about as well.
It's so true. I picked up the first Scholomance book because I loved Naomi Novik's other novels, and I 100% in no way loved the first Scholomance novel. So, you know, it works both ways, though. You're good, as you say, if you've tried the Scholomance and you don't like it, do not write off the rest of Naomi Novik, because you could find it. It's absolutely your cup of tea, because that's certainly the case with me.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think with me, it was the second to last book that I read during the readathon, and I was just ready to be done with all of my books.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, so just like learning about the school and stuff was fun, but then also I was just like, okay, I want to be done.
Yeah.
I get that.
So I probably didn't give it a fair chance.
I feel like I've heard that quite a few people saying that towards the end of the readathon, like they've had to like give books lower ratings than they might usually do because they were just kind of like wanted to get through them, which is a shame. Hannah, I'm so sorry, I completely forgot you.
It's okay, don't worry. As long as I'm still here, it's all good.
Right, let's go to Hannah now for the book eaters, and then we'll come back to you, Goda, for the final Strife.
Sounds good.
There she is.
There we go. So yes, one of the 5 group read picks for October was The Book Eaters by Sunyi. And I think there was quite a few reasons this was nominated. There was quite a lot of hype about this book throughout this year before it came out in August. And I also think it was a kind of considered a good pick for October because it's like a fantasy horror crossover. But also, in addition, the lovely Sunyi attended the Fantasy Fellowship convention at the end of September and did a session with us, which was great. So the book itself tells the story of Devon, who is a book eater, which is someone who consumes like pages of books for sustenance, but also, I think, from memory, gains knowledge from them. This was like 11 books ago, so bear with me, it's the first book I read in October. And it's also about her son, who is a mind eater, so someone who consumes the minds and souls of humans, with some moral questions. So feedback in the group, I would say, was generally positive, but there was kind of some elements that people liked less, which I think are more a personal taste thing. So one of the things about the book is it switches between timelines. So you've got Devon and her son in the present day, and then you kind of flick back in time to see Devon in the past and kind of understand her motivations and how she kind of ended up in this place in the book. And for some people, I think that's just not their bag. Personally, I really like that as a narrative device and love kind of like building the mystery, and like it kind of helps me read faster because I'm like, I'm getting closer to the present day. I'm going to find out why this happened. So yeah, that was quite a big kind of feedback from a lot of people. I think another thing is that The Book Eaters is quite unusual for a fantasy novel in that it is, it's like, I think the standard version is like 297 pages or something. So yeah, it was quite short. So one of the other criticisms was that it was perhaps too short, because actually there's potentially more that could have been said about the characters, about their experience, about what happened. And I think some people felt, some of the feedback was a bit mixed. Some people felt the book was quite slow because of the mixed timelines, and some people felt that it was quite fast because of like the brevity of the book. So yeah, I would say on the whole positive, but a bit of a mix in there as well. So one thing Sunyi did say, I'm pretty sure, at the convention, is that Tor only purchased the book as a standalone. Yeah, please reassure me I'm not making that up. I'm sure she said that. But I think a really key piece of feedback is that almost everyone said, like, where's the sequel? Like, there's so much more, I think, that can be said about the character of Devon, but also about the Book Eater world. I don't want to like give too many spoilers, but they've definitely got quite a like sophisticated society there, and there's definitely like more to explore. So I'm like really hopeful that someone from Tor watches this video and this makes them like contact Sunyi and go, get cracking on book 2. Yay. We need more. But for me, I will say I actually think it's one of my favorite books I've read this month, because I do sort of agree that there's a bit of like untapped potential in the story, but also I really liked the themes in this book. So like motherhood is a huge theme in the book, but there's also like heteronormativity, there's patriarchy, there's like some LGBT representation. Like there's lots of stuff packed into this. And one thing I did also really enjoy was that, so the book is set in the UK, but deliberately not set in London. In fact, I'm sure Sunyi said at the convention that the book is intended as a bit of a love letter to Yorkshire in the north of England. And I think that like element of space was captured really well, and is something I would like to see more of in Sunyi's writing going forward.
Amazing. I like fun fact, The Book Eaters was the first book that I read after finishing The Realm of the Elderlings.
No!
Assassin's Fate. Yes.
Oh, you were setting yourself up for failure there,
So I
Sarah.
had a really hard job.
Yeah.
But yeah, I loved it. I agree with everything you said. And it's just unlike anything that I've ever read before. And I loved that Sunyi's prompt for the readathon was about like reading a book from like a mix of genres, because I think it's just so refreshing sometimes. I think you can get really stuck in a rut with your reading, can't you? And to have something that's just like so original, it's really refreshing.
And like there's, again, I don't want to say too much because people please go and read this book, but there's also like a sort of minor mention of what would provide, actually, if the story was allowed to go forward, like a surprise genre twist. Which is very cool and interesting. So yeah, I just think there's just more to explore. I don't really understand why Tor purchased it as a standalone. Like, this is a cool world to explore, I think.
I think, like, from what I've seen, the reception's been amazing. It's had bloody loads of special editions and stuff, hasn't it?
Yeah, this is the Illumicrate one, and it's very pretty.
Yeah, I think I've got a couple.
Yeah.
Broken Mind and one Illumicrate.
Yeah, I've got the Waterstones one with the epilogue, actually, which I think did make a difference, and I would recommend getting your hands on if you can, because it just like nicely pads out the ending a bit more.
Excellent. And very, very atmospheric. So one to read over the next couple of weeks if anyone hasn't picked it up yet, if they want to keep the spooky season vibes going.
Absolutely.
Okay, Goda, the final Strife, another one of our convention authors.
I'm just going to start with this.
That cover is gorgeous.
Yes, it's such a beautiful book, and the end papers.
Oh wow.
Wow.
So gorgeous.
Amazing.
And this is the normal Waterstones edition, so it's not like a special edition or something. So yeah, it's signed. I had luck. I was lucky. So I got the signed edition, but yeah, it's just the normal one. It's beautiful. It's really, I think it's one of the most amazing covers for normal editions that I know. So yeah, the final Strife. I don't think there were that many people that read it, actually. So the group discussion was a little bit quiet, but everybody who read it really, really loved it, and said it was an amazing book, and I wholeheartedly agree. I love the world. Maybe I'm gonna tell something about the world. So it's the final Strife takes place in a world that's strictly divided. There are the Ambers, that's like the ruling class. They have red blood. Then there are the Dusters. They have blue blood, and they are the working class, and they work under atrocious conditions sometimes. Are not paid well and stuff like that. And then there are the Ghostings. They are like the lowest class, and their blood is transparent. And they are, when I say they are the lowest class, they really are the lowest class. There are atrocious things happening to them. It's what happens to them is a bit, Saara El-Arifi said, it's a little bit inspired is maybe the wrong word, but like what happened in the Congo during the massacres that were there. And so it's really, she did it really well. She encompassed that. And they don't they cannot really communicate, or at least people don't think they can communicate, but in reality they can. So that's like the setup for this world. And the Ambers are the ruling class with the red blood, and they can blood work. So that's something that I really like when there's magic, and I like when it's somehow when it's got to do when it comes with a cost. So yeah, like blood work. And in the final Strife, we follow Syla, and she. That's not a spoiler if you have read the blurb at the back. Yeah, so she's one of the stolen. So she's actually an Amber. She has red blood, but she lives with the Dusters because they want to start a revolution, and they want to have an Amber with the Duster's heart at the top. And yeah, it's the whole build-up is really, really great because Syla is lovable, but she's a disaster. She makes the wrong choices. She gets in with the wrong crowd, and yeah, she forgets what she wanted to do. It's all got a reason, but still. And then a bit later on, we meet Anur, who is the second main character, and she lives in the Amber world, so she lives a much more sheltered life and is like the opposite of Syla. And this relationship between them is also something that is done really, really well. And yeah, I just loved it. I love that it's got a female love representation, that it's got it's like enemies to friends to lovers. So yeah, I don't know if it's too spoilery to say that. It's in the reviews on Goodreads by Saara El-Arifi, so I don't know, but yeah, I really enjoyed it.
Oh, it sounds so interesting. And it's had like such an amazing reception, hasn't it? I don't think I've seen anything but like amazing reviews for it.
Yeah, and it's like I really want to know how it continues. I'm so mad that I have to wait.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't end on a huge cliffhanger, so it's not that bad like with some other books. But still, it's just the world opened up, so you really want to know how it continues because you feel like you just started seeing it, and also there's like a little bit of a I don't want to say Hunger Games vibe, but a little bit of a Hunger Games vibe, but only for wealthy people, like maybe. So I really enjoyed that as well.
Oh, you sound so excited in different.
About it. It goes in different directions you wouldn't expect it to go. So yeah, it was one of my favorite reads, I think, this month.
I'm gonna be in trouble after this video. I just want to read all these books now. Oh, thank you, Yagoda. That sounds amazing, and I definitely need to try and prioritize it. I think the sequel has been announced recently, so that's exciting. And that is us done. Thanks everyone for watching this Fantasy Fellowship Buddy Read wrap up. It's been a lot of fun talking about the books that we have read in the community over the last month. Thank you to these lovely ladies that have joined me this evening to talk about those books and hopefully add some more to your TBR and mine. Don't forget that if you want to get involved with any of our book club and buddy reads, everyone is welcome to join our community Discord, which is linked below in the description. To find out more about the Fantasy Fellowship, you can find us on Instagram, where we are at fantasy_fellowship, Twitter, where we are at fanfellowship. We also have a website, www.fantasy-fellowship.co.uk. And if you've enjoyed this buddy read wrap up, be sure to hit like, and to keep up to date with more Fantasy Fellowship videos, hit the subscribe button. Thank you. Bye.